Welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology, leadership, and the future of business. I'm your host today, Ben Johnson, founder and CEO of Particle 41, where we build world-class teams that deliver outcome-focused digital solutions. Today, I'm incredibly excited because we have a true AI visionary joining us. He's trained over 30,000 executives across government, banking, finance, and technology. He's received a glowing testimonial from the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I'm super excited to introduce you today to Mo Hasan. Mo, anything you want to add to your introduction there?
I love technology. I love business, and you'd be hard pressed to find someone more passionate about AI than me in the modern world.
So, Mo, before we dive into your incredible work with AI education, we have a tradition on the show. It's called the lightning round. And I would love to know how you made your first dollar as a human being.
Okay, so my first dollar as a human being was a financial business that I ran in the fourth grade. I grew up in a lower middle class family, and I figured out how to fill out some forms so I could get free lunch at school because my mom wasn't making that much money. And then I would loan out quarters to kids after they would come back from playing outside at 100% interest per day. And then that became like my first way of like how I was able to afford food, like going out money and doing things was during that business. That was my very first.
Awesome. Was there a toy or hobby that influenced what you do career-wise today?
Yeah, I would say it was the Microsoft world. I grew up with, fortunately, access to a computer. And so I mastered DOS at a very early age by the time I was 8 years old. And that Windows was my life as a teenager. And so being immersed in technology always gave me a chance to participate in something new, something exciting. And it had my attention from the very, very beginning.
So let's start with your origin story. You started in U.S. Army intelligence and then moved to network engineering,
Yes.
then executive training, and now you're one of the leading voices in AI education. What was the pivotal moment that made you say AI education is where I need to be?
I would say that for a very long time, it wasn't just necessarily AI. Well, I've been talking about AI for over 25 years, right? But I've been advocating for automation, workflows, and seeing the future for a long time. And it was actually about 3 years ago when OpenAI finally came out with ChatGPT and things were getting popular. I had stopped working by then. I've taken off about 5 years in my life. And I'm at a friend's house and hanging out in their swimming pool. And I'm like, let me show you what I can do with AI, right? Just for fun. Like I didn't even thought about doing it. It was just my own obsession. And my friend says, if you did that for my business, I would pay you $5,000 for the day. And then at the same pool party, another friend goes, wait, what is he doing for you? And then it just started out that what I thought was something that most people knew, like that everyone was playing with AI at the same level. It turned out that wasn't the case. For me, the real opportunity came in that moment in the pool. Wow, my friends who are smart and tech savvy are not using AI and they want to learn. That was the moment that I was like, okay, I really need to turn all my attention in executive training on just large language models, generative AI, and what people can do with it.
Awesome. What's something, is there a person experience or even a failure early in your career that fundamentally shaped how you approach teaching today?
I don't know if I would necessarily call it a failure per se, but I was at Verizon in the late 90s. And I remember sitting in a room with the CEO and a bunch of VPs and a few board members. And I'm the only one in the room with no college degree, right? Like hardly any experience in the real world. And they're looking to me for answers. And that was that moment I was like, I think I'm the stupidest person in the room. Like, I need to learn everything possible so that I'm no longer the stupidest person. It was that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. What's a popular opinion in the AI space right now that you think is completely wrong?
That AI is hard, that AI is technical, right? Hard and technical, I would say is the combination. If it's completely erroneous.
Yeah. You've delivered keynotes around the world and trained thousands of executives. What's your personal ritual before stepping on stage or into a high stakes training session?
To be as nervous as humanly possible. That's my ritual. Right? There's a lot of humility that comes in from of like before I get on stage to know that, gosh, all of these people are giving me their attention, right? That I get to be the person on stage and all these people are giving me their attention. I have a responsibility to deliver a clear message that hopefully not only makes sense, but can serve them beyond just that session. So that nervousness gets me grounded into the responsibility of the matter.
Yeah. Mo, let's dive into what you've created, the Hasan Method. When I was researching for the conversation, I was struck by how different your approach is from typical, 'cause there's so many of those course flooding the market. Can you walk us through what the Hasan Method actually is and why you felt compelled to create it?
Absolutely. Well, I'll start with why I felt compelled to create it. Very early on in this 3 year stage, I started testing out AI training with clients because people would call me up and say, "Hey, our executive team needs some training. Will you come in and do some trainings?" I'm like, "Sure." They come in, I do the training. And what I discovered is as I followed up with these clients a few months later, very little had happened. Which is strange because during the trainings, the enthusiasm level was like a 10 out of 10. Everyone is, oh my gosh, AI is going to be everything. This is what we've been waiting for. And then months later, I find that they're doing nothing with it. There's a huge user adoption issue. So I created a methodology to handle the three basic components that I think everybody needs. The first is the why. Why are you using AI? And this, for me, is an important understanding because there's a lot of people out there that are using AI for reasons of violence and control and war and other purposes, right? Or just for profit. And I think we have an opportunity right now to use AI for good in the world. So the why is the first part. The second is that there's a huge misunderstanding of how to communicate with AI. It's like AI is this mystical, almost like esoteric, very nebulous entity. And people are wondering, how do I talk to this entity? And the vast majority of people online are giving prompt templates or the simplified things. And that's not really the answer. And then the third part of it is contextual, is to solve the problem of how do we give contextual data to the large language models so that way we can actually achieve real world machine learning and get more professional results. And that's how I ended up creating a methodology to handle all three components.
That's cool. Man, you're really good at breaking this down. I also noticed that I'm particularly interested in your 7 point ethics framework. A lot of folks are, at least in the enterprise, there's a kind of a slow AI adoption around governance. And in a world where AI training focuses purely on capability and efficiency, you've put ethics at the center. Can you walk us through these 7 points and why each one matters?
So, just a little bit of background to understand why we're talking about ethics, how this matters. And I think Isaac Asimov's three laws of AI governance is what most of us who are sci-fi geeks, right? We grew up on these. And the reality is that none of those laws are applicable for modern large language models. Large language models are designed to overcome barriers and problems. So as soon as you tell it, don't do this, and you can't do this, it instantly will overcome that and go do that. So that's the first issue we have. The next thing is that when it comes to ethics, I've taken the approach that the responsibility of ethics falls on the AI operator, the human being, not the machinery. Every test on planet Earth has demonstrated over and over again that we cannot regulate the machines. What we can do is regulate ourselves. So the 7 policies I've actually been working on for a very long time now. It's been over 15 years. And so here's the policies real fast, right? And we can dive into these for hours on end. And remember, this is for self-governance, so the policies are written in first person. Policy number 1 is remembering that who I am is the spirit, possessing and controlling a body, utilizing an intelligence, experiencing a contiguous series of emotional states. And it is a distinction from the ghost and the machine, right? That there is something to say there's value in organic life, in natural life, that me as a human being am delineated from artificial life, right? So that understanding that human life is valuable is where we start, is in policy number 1. Policy number 2 is that it's only true if it's true for me. Now, why this is important is because what we've found is that very often people have a tendency to just take AI, take whatever outputs that they get, and just accept it as is, instead of actually evaluating it as the truth for themselves. So policy number 2 is really focused on putting the responsibility of understanding on the human. Okay? Number 3 is actually the minimum standard for understanding itself. Right? Like, how do I know I understand? At a minimum, I should be able to produce a dictionary quality definition of all the words, terms, and symbols that I communicated. And if I really understand a topic, I should be able to write a book on it, give talks on it, right? I should be able to interview people on it, things of that nature. And this is so that you're not just reading an output and going past words and stuff that you don't know and then delivering nonsensical outputs, right? That's number 3. Policy number 4 is my guiding principle for morality. That if I were to look at the greater world outside of just me as an individual, right? I've got family, I've got friends, I've got communities I belong to, mankind, and the animal kingdom, the spiritual universe, and even the infinite, that when we are making a decision, when we're choosing projects, that project must be good, not just for me, but for all the aspects of life, right? That it is a pan determination in looking at projects itself. So that's number 4. Policy number 5 has to do with us making mistakes, because we all make mistakes. So there's two parts of this. One is that when we are dealing with other human beings that we're interacting with, we can exercise compassion because mistakes are a part of life. And then for ourselves, instead of beating ourselves up every single time we make a mistake, we can take an iterative approach to our work, creating a version, then getting feedback, and then improving it and making another version and another version. And so that's the way to understand it. Now, in AI, this iterative approach is faster than anything we've ever had before. So that's number 5. And then number 6 is, how do I participate in economic exchange? How do we exchange value between us? And there's essentially 4 levels of exchange available to us. At the lowest level would be criminal exchange. So imagine, Ben, I came to your house, I took all your stuff, and I give you nothing. We call that
Right.
theft, we call that a lot of things, but that's criminal exchange. The next is partial exchange, where somebody gives a lot and somebody gives just a little bit, which is, I think, a lesson most people learn in college when they're working on university projects with other students.
Right.
And then the third level is fair exchange, like a tit for tat. Okay, I do this for you, you do this for me. And instead of those 3, what I'm proposing is the fourth level available, which answers the question of where does abundance come from? Abundance comes because I create the abundance. And so I refer to this as a exchange in abundance. That if we're going to do something together in business and relationships, why not open up my entire Rolodex or address book for the younger people, right? Why not actually use all of my resources, all of my understanding to contribute to this particular initiative or project? So it's that exchange of abundance. And why this is extremely important now in the world of AI is without the previous limiters of geographic space and resources, now all of a sudden we can plan projects to do extraordinary work in the world. We don't have to be limited to just like the bare minimum.
Right.
And then the final policy is, just because I can doesn't mean I should. Right? Doesn't, in
Right.
a life of abundance, I have a lot of options. So I should align my actions with my values, my agreements, the things that actually are most important to me, to ensure that I'm doing projects that are fully aligned.
Yeah, the 7 points of AI ethics I'm familiar with is, and I think you cover most of these, but you go into some interesting detail: transparency, where did the information come from, accountability, human ownership of AI assisted decisions, privacy, protecting data. That's even though you can, should you, the fairness principle, like you were talking about with the exchange, safety, making sure we don't cause harm, human agency, and sustainability or long term societal impact. Which of your 7 points do you find executives most often overlook? And what are the consequences when they do?
I think that unfortunately they overlook all of them. Sadly, what I found so far with AI projects is that policy number 2, then it's only true if it's true for me, is that instead of taking responsibility to evaluate information and to understand systems and programs, executives have a tendency to just depend on a technologist or a consultant to come in and tell them, this is my answer. And that's where it's like, no, 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 you need to understand. You're the person in charge. You're the signator at the end of the day. And so I think the responsibility of understanding falls on the executives, and a lot of them aren't taking that on.
Yeah, we have a leadership principle inside my organization where it's my responsibility to be understood. And I think if people, when they're in communication or in relationship with another, if they both equally took that responsibility, then there would be no unclear communication, right? We would confirm understanding and accept that mutual responsibility. Can you share a specific example, maybe from some of your past work, where applying the Hasan method led to a breakthrough or prevented a potential disaster?
Let's start with the breakthrough, okay? And for me, like the biggest breakthroughs are with non-technical users, the ones that for them AI is such a foreign entity they can't even think about it. So the one of my clients is the city of Laurel in Maryland, and I remember doing a training session with them, and the gentleman who's the manager for Parks and Recreations was in the session, and his boss comes to me before the session and says, "Hey, listen, no, the head of Parks and Recs is going to be in here. He's not a techie." He's not a computer guy and he's interested in AI. Just be aware that he might slow down your session. He might do this and this. Right. So I'm getting like a warning. Interestingly enough, as we're talking in the session, and I start talking to him about what do you want to do in the city in the Parks and Recs department? And he starts sharing his vision for projects that are going on and services that he wants to provide for children and picnics and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, okay, what else? What else? And he's like, I can't do anything else. We don't have a budget for anything else. I said, okay, great. Let's just pause there for a second. What are your resources on your team? And he lists out the team members that he has, from like groundskeeping to maintenance to installation of facilities. And then I said, what if you could put every single Parks and Recs executives on your payroll with no cost? And all of a sudden his ears perked up, right? Because they're one of the initiatives that they have in the city is a revitalization of their Main Street. And of course, Parks and Recs is part of it because Main Street is a community facility. So I start sharing with them the ideas that, hey, if we start looking at other models of Main Street and other Parks and Recs departments around the world, we can see that there's been a bunch of different projects executed around the world. You can now learn from those projects, take the lessons learned, take the best practices, and integrate it into your projects at no additional cost. And there's nothing to click. Right? What do you have in a ChatGPT or any large language model? You got an upload button, you got to upload a photo and the send and maybe turn on the web search or not. Or it's a handful of buttons. It's not like Excel with over 1,500 commands. And then I showed him how to use speech to text and just talk to the thing. I hear from his boss like a week after the training, and she's, Mo, I don't know what you did, but he is driving everyone crazy with AI. He's generating reports, coming up with more ideas than anyone can handle. Like he's on fire. And for me, that's amazing transformation.
Right.
Take someone who's a non-technical user and to open up a job they're already passionate about, and then now be able to do way more. That's awesome. That's a fun thing to achieve.
I think we've certainly seen that as a services company where there's this fear like we're going to do all the work so fast there won't be any more work. It's just a misconception. I almost think that there's an ethical component to not leverage if we really want to serve our customers. And culturally, we say all the time, make every day count. We're here to accomplish our client's mission. And so I almost think we have an ethical responsibility to leverage it as much as possible and pass that savings onto the customer. If we can accomplish their mission in half the time or in a third of the time, then why not do that? And in my experience, in my career, writing the code wasn't the barrier. Writing the code or coming up with the technology wasn't the barrier. And so if we do our job, we're almost writing at the speed of thought in a way, in a business process format, I'm not trying to be fantastical here that we're writing code as fast as they can think about it, but that at the speed of decision making, we have a real opportunity to realize ideas and put that in front of users at a much faster pace. So I think we have an opportunity and an obligation really to leverage any tool to the maximum benefit of our client.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily even tell people that you're going to get things done faster. What if you just did a much better job? You're already used to your timelines. If you'd seen in the past, you took 6 months to create a project plan for Main Street, and now we can make that project plan in 3 days. It would be great if you would spend the next 5.5 months improving that plan, making sure that the resident services are optimal, all the values of the city are aligned, that the government is set up to support the project long term. You have full buy-in from community leaders. You make sure that there's a community focus, not just rushing to market because you're late on the deadline. There's something to be said for being early and having the time to audit and review and improve these things before we start to break ground.
Yeah, we're working on an accounting system for a client, and to be able to compare to other like an accounting system, a general ledger should be an academically available thing, the proper design of a general ledger. And so to be able to look at other open source implementations or other academic guidance quickly as we're designing is a lot like, why not? Why not make the first blush the absolute best it can be? Which is a great segue to something that really caught my attention that you've been working on and that we discussed earlier. You mentioned that even children are being really perceptive with these tools. Can you paint a picture of what the democratization of AI actually looks like in practice?
Okay, so I've been teaching my methodology in lots of places, and I would say that the typical time that an adult takes to understand and to be able to utilize it is about 2 days on the fast end of things. I've done some experiments with kids, and the kids get it in as little as 2 hours. And it's because there's so much baggage that adults have around their own indecisions in business that actually prevent them from moving forward, right? So for instance, if I go to the typical executive and say, can you please draft up a quick one-page executive summary of what you do? It's like crickets. Their eyes glaze over. You want me to tell you what I do? I can't do that in a paragraph. There's no way I can do that in a paragraph. Versus when I taught kids to do it, the kids are like, Mr. Mo, how do I write an executive summary? And I'm like, you're going to do a voice recording and explain just what you do. Then you're going to load that up and ask AI to formalize that executive summary. Done. That was it. Like it took no time at all. But adults have a tendency to hesitate, delay, because just they don't want to commit that this is it, this is who I am, and then share that with the AI to do the work. And that's been one of the greatest challenges to see adults struggle and kids do awesome at it.
Yeah. And you're working on some low code, no code ML. Historically, machine learning required PhDs and specialized infrastructure, months of development. Now you're teaching executives and kids to build ML models. How is this possible and what does it mean for organizations?
So please don't hate me for the simplicity of this. Okay. This is essentially just a discovery that happened in my body of work and had some influence with some friends who are AI experts or real machine learning experts. Because I'm not a developer. Right? You can write code. I definitely cannot. Last time I wrote code was Turbo Pascal in 1993. The way no code machine learning works is very simple. We organize information using natural language processing into a file that is a markdown file. Right? Now, you as a technologist, of course, you know what a markdown file is. 99% of business users have no idea what it is. Right? And it's just an unstructured file type that allows us the freedom and flexibility to put in any programming language that we want, or a database, or an image, or a video. Instead, what we're doing is putting in text. And in that text, I just came up with a format of how to organize it, an initial set of machine learning instructions in English that trigger the machine learning. Then there's a section on who I am, what I'm doing, my strategy. This is the core of my data set, the bulk of the data. The third section is on output parameters. How do I want the model to behave algorithmically, systematically, linguistically, and formatting? All of that is articulated in section 3. And then section 4, we do a verification of understanding. All of it is written in English that any business user can understand. Now, getting the average person to write an executive summary is already a challenge, but we take that in English, we take that markdown file, we load it at the beginning of any conversation where a file is accepted, and instant machine learning. Because what happens is when we think about what's going on with the AI, right? Like in traditional software development, we have the side of dev and then some sort of compiling or an execution, and then we've got the user input. So in this case, it's machine learning, whatever is the processing, and then the prompting. What I'm doing is at the beginning of the prompting side, at the very initial step, we're just doing one last thing that's typically done in the development side. And so without a prompt, loading up that markdown file instantly loads all of your information as the latest contextual data, and now allowing you to create extraordinary and professional grade results right away. And there's a lot of benefits that come with it that I'm happy to go into a more technical side of things. But that's it. It's just plain text, organized, put into a markdown file, and the file type matters. And the reason why file types matters is because usually when we're loading up ML functions, we're doing it in a JSON file or a markdown file, but we're not loading PDFs, right? That's not how you train a model. And so getting people's heads around just the markdown file itself has been a challenge. Right? A lot of users are confused by that.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate for a moment. Some technical pursuits would say no code ML produces inferior results. You need deep expertise to build reliable models. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, you go take your $500 million and start spending it. I'll see you in 5 years. I'll have a result for you in an hour.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, so I've seen the low code, no code movement for a long time. The end result, I think, but you're not, this is probably a little bit out of place, but what I've typically seen with the Salesforces of the world or the NetSuites of the world, where there was a kind of this original promise of low code, no code.
Yeah.
Then the end result is you have a license fee and an expert devoted to that low code, no code framework. And so we've seen this tension firsthand. We had deep expertise in custom ML implementations, but we're also helping clients leverage platforms that abstract away complexity. The sweet spot is often knowing which each approach makes sense. So from your experience, how do you executives understand when they need like a no-code solution versus they need to bring in technical partners?
So my solution is not a replacement for a technical machine learning solution. It is a complement to that functionality. So the biggest challenges we have right now in machine learning, and I think it is as clear as day for those of us that keep in touch with this is that no code machine or machine learning is the most heavily invested in project set in the history of mankind, right? We're over trillions of dollars right now of allocation for machine learning. Is that we have a system of machine learning as a process where we are currently facing a 90% failure rate in machine learning after 6 months. And this is global. Includes Meta, Apple. This includes everybody. Actually, Apple's much longer, right, of their failure rate because now they just spend all this money on Google to do this for them. So we have a process that, yes, that's what we want, but the failure rate is extremely high. The cost is extremely high. The difficulty of implementation is high. And so it's not a viable solution for the typical government agency, business entity, entrepreneur, or individual to think about machine learning as a solution for that. What I've created is a practical way for the layman to do machine learning and implement it immediately and at a fraction of the cost. And by a fraction, almost no costs at all. I'm working on democratizing this around the world to make it as accessible as possible. And part of this is about using AI to do a couple of things. One is we're looking for a significant reduction in hallucination. So if you think about what most users are doing in a conversation, right? They're starting at the beginning of the conversation, they load up contextual data and more contextual data and more contextual data, and more, and then they prompt and they prompt and they keep going. Eventually that conversation is going to lead to a hallucination. What's happening that a lot of users don't realize is that every single time you start prompting in the same conversation, the system is going back and reprocessing all that other information, so you're burning up tokens. So if you made an error along the way, that error has now bled down further. The advantage of having your data independently owned by you and not stuck with a large language model is you have now created a true democratized way to take your personal data and do machine learning across the entire suite of large language models and have a fresh conversation with the minimum usage of tokens, right? And so far, all of our testing has shown a 99% reduction in hallucinations. This is not marginal. This is huge. Then there's something else that happens in this model, which is really important, which just has to do with epistemic humility. And do you mind if I take a moment to explain
Yeah,
epistemic
explain
humility?
it, please.
So epistemic being like a system of knowledge, right? And humility being like, hey, maybe I don't know. And if you notice, your large language models, especially ChatGPT, is very confident when it gives you wrong answers. It gives you tons of errors, makes tons of hallucinations, and it's like, yes, this is it. Don't you know, Ben? This is the way. And then you point out, hey, this is completely erroneous. And then it's like, whoa, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Now this is the answer. So the systems natively do not exercise epistemic humility. With my no-code machine learning solution, epistemic humility is built in no matter what system you're on. So when you do that initial prompt, instead of it just like giving you an output, it actually asks you questions to get further clarification on data that's missing instead of just plugging in made-up data. So the ability for a system to exercise epistemic humility, this is one of the magical things that we hope to do in ML. And we're doing it right now in no-code, in multiple languages, including Spanish and Portuguese and many other places that I've tested it. And it works beautifully. So to be able to achieve that is already an extraordinary thing. And that's, I think these things are important now.
Yeah, this brings up something I think about a lot. There's a massive gap in the market between AI education and AI implementation. Companies take a course, get excited, then struggle to actually execute. Mo, you mentioned you intentionally stay in your lane, education, training, executive development, and partner for technical implementation. Why that choice?
I don't want to build for the public. I am building things. And I'm building things with a group of humans that want to build things. But we're building something without the controls and external factors. AI run amok is dangerous, extremely dangerous. And there's no shortage of companies out there that are currently pursuing AI for control and profit and murder and many other things. And so what I want to do first and foremost is make sure that I'm using my abilities as an educator and as a communicator and a speaker to be an advocate for AI for good. That we have a unique opportunity in time that we're not going to have again. The world will never be in this early stage ever again. What's going to happen 3 years from now? We're going to have robots in our houses. Already in Zoom meetings, I feel like every Zoom meeting I'm in, there's more AI agents than humans in the meetings, and it's only going to keep growing. Right now, what we have as humanity is an opportunity to actually create a world that works. And what I mean by creating a world that works is something that's responsible, that we're creating things with ancient wisdom and human values and care for the environment and care for each other and to create workability, right? Things that we've always wanted. But if we take that approach of survival first and profit first, then we can't achieve. So I'm using education as my focus on that. And then the things that I'm building as far as like tools and solutions and automation, I don't need to sell those goodies to the world. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example. I recently made, from everything that I've witnessed, the most advanced AI powered ghostwriting and editing program. Okay. And the editing part is a 7-stage editing process. If you don't have a Claude Max account, you can't even run this thing, right? There's no way you have enough tokens to process even just half a chapter because there's so much that goes into it. And I've had a lot of friends who are like, hey, are you going to sell it? First, I designed it for myself, right? So make it easier for me to put out my body of work. And no, I'm only going to offer it internally. I'm actually launching a private club, and all of my solutions are only going to be available internal to the club. There's some, gosh, I mean, Ben, you're a techie, so you'll understand. Like, there's some magical things that are happening right now. And I've
Yeah.
designed a set of C-suite tools that give superpowers to human beings. But I don't want some CEO that's going to use this tool to oppress people or police for profit or do all the other nonsensical things. I want to keep tight reins on it and share with the group of people that actually want to use it for good.
We're very much the opposite, not in terms of wanting to oppress people, but we feel like we're stone cold execution mercenaries leading to our clients' success. I heard the other day that there's still over 200,000 applications running in AS400. Like we're talking about
200,000.
200,000
Whoa.
applications,
Wow.
probably many of which are in government. We talked to an insurance company that's still running critical systems in Access databases.
Well, Microsoft doesn't even support Access anymore, do they?
Correct. We're at the apex of this. And then a small business who did a digital transformation back in 2018 can no longer compete. And so we just see so much opportunity for modernization and for accelerating your business, and such a, if you're not doing that, you're a competitor or a kid with Lovable or Base 44 is all of a sudden replacing you. And so we want to align with, we want to help our clients like not have that happen. And then I love modernizing legacy systems. Like I just think there's something sexy but not sexy about that all at the same time. We did a couple of Cobalt replacements, leveraged AI to persist business logic, but not take on terminal prompting, like legacy terminal prompting. And the results have been really great with that. To phrase this as a question, you consider yourself an AI visionary. Let me ask you, it's 2030, 5 years from now. What does the landscape of AI in enterprise specifically look like? What are you most excited about, and what keeps you up at night?
I think what keeps me up at night is where we're already headed, where we already are. If we look at where are we using everything from facial recognition software, many of these other tools, they're primarily being used under the guise of security for some sort of control slash oppression slash profiteering. The Nazis with AI and robots is a hella scary vision. And I won't mention where in the world this is already happening, but there's some places where that's what people want. That's what people are focusing billions of dollars of money to achieve that type of system. So what I'm excited about in enterprises is that there's the potentiality of a great awakening of mankind. And in that awakening is to see for themselves the ability to create a world, right? As an individual to create a world that actually creates the maximum good for the entirety of the world. That's what I see as exciting, is for executives to look at their processes, to look at their human capital, their outputs that they're doing to the world, to look at supply chain. Right? Let's take supply chain. I'm excited about the opportunity to reduce slavery in the supply chain. Did you know that on planet Earth, it's impossible to have luxury without slavery?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to another guest about their engineering some mining equipment. Think of it as like huge machinery that's actually like a lot of our mining would not be possible without like most of our electronics, the elements in there, cobalt being one of them, huge slave labor.
If you drive a Tesla, you're responsible for a lot of slavery. If you have a
Right.
cell phone, you're responsible for slavery. So I think that's an opportunity for us to combine not just AI, but the other part of it, which is the actionable things in the physical universe that robots will be able to help us to combine those technologies together to create a much better supply chain for the entire world.
Yeah, and along that train of thought, I've said for a long time since Twitter was still mostly written in Ruby. I was a big Rubyist 10 years ago. And, what I often said is, wow, we're in the information age. And much like the industrial age, we were bad at it. Like we made a lot of mistakes, a lot of pollution, a lot of chemicals. We created Teflon. As a society, we weren't super good at industrializing, not very responsible. And with information, we've been really irresponsible. That the way we feel about the information has swayed the information heavily. And what concerns me is that AI is built on top of that irresponsibility with information. And so rather than history being about facts, it's about how we feel or the narrative we want to take from the history. Your fourth book is called Organizing the Universe.
Actually,
Yours,
I no, actually, it's called The Last Human Generation. Organizing
Last
the
Human
Universe
Generation.
was, it's on hold because I decided to focus on this one first. It's called The Last Human Generation.
Okay, The Last Human Generation.
Yes.
Does it explore the intersection of AI, emotional intelligence, and process engineering, or did you pivot from that?
No, no, it absolutely dives into that. It absolutely dives into
Cool.
that and explains the entirety of my methodology as well, and has some fun stories from lots of different adventures. And what the book is primarily focused on is a few different things. One is giving you a foundational understanding of AI far beyond internet noise, right? Like a deep rooted understanding of it. Next, it's an understanding of you as an operator can participate with it from day to day communications, project planning, and then finally a vision for the world from starting at home, working to community, working towards enterprises and businesses and governments, and looking at the world as a whole. Hey, what can we do to create that workability? And so that's what's in the book, is all of that.
Oh, awesome. For executives that are listening that are feeling overwhelmed, AI is moving super fast, new models every week, regulatory uncertainty, talent gaps. What's your one piece of advice? Where should they start?
They should join my AI Academy. It's designed specifically for that as a way to bring people not just up to speed, but to give them professional grade abilities to get results in life. And then they're across the entire segment of large language models and generative AI, not just text. And because one of the major issues we have, what I hear time and time again is that, okay, I can explain. For those of us that are technologists and someone says, how do you use AI? The answer is every way possible. What do you mean, how do you use AI? I can think of an infinite number of ways. But the typical executive that I sit down with, they're like, I just need use case. I need a use case that's practical and how I can use it. And so part of the point of this academy is to take people through use case after use case, from everything from how do you apply this methodology in the procurement process, in the sense of you're responding to RFPs, right? Requests for proposals, requests for quotes, all those things that are very, very time consuming typically. How do we use it for that? How do we use it for contract management, vendor management, but also as a way to look at and evaluate our projects for maximum efficacy and maximum impact.
Yeah.
Right? Move beyond.
For those technology leaders and developers, what do they need to understand about the human side that often gets overlooked?
I would say what oftentimes gets overlooked by technologists is let's go back for a second. I say that there's two things that when you're thinking about human performance, those of us that work in executive performance and with high performers in general, the topics of spirituality and emotional intelligence come in early and together. For the average technologist, it's not even an afterthought. It doesn't even show up later in an audit, doesn't show up later in a board meeting. They don't think about it at all. And so I would say that the thing that's missing is that to make an AI solution for the sake of making an AI solution, I consider stupid. You made a tool that does something for no reason. Versus if we look around, we are very fortunate right now that the world is messed up. We're fortunate that the rivers are flooded with trash, the oceans are flooded with plastic, we have wars in the world. Why I say we're fortunate is because we are the generation that's going to be able to resolve those issues using technology. And what a
Right.
fun thing to do, right? To make that.
Yeah. Mo, this has been an incredible conversation. Before we wrap, where can our audience learn more about you and Into Power?
So you can just go to my website at intopower.com, INTU, then power.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and other socials. So I'll be putting out a lot more content. I'm on a backlog of hundreds of hours of content that I'm getting rid of load out here to the web. And then I would say it's like I'm also speaking at a lot of conferences around the world. So if you see me speaking at an upcoming conference, come have a conversation with me. I like talking to human beings, right? I'm a very human-centric business person. And that's in my company is probably the best place to get started on our website, intopower.com.
Yeah, I always love to end like this, but what's one thing you want our audience to remember from the conversation if they forget everything else? What should stick?
You already have all of the abilities needed to be extremely powerful with AI. Now it's time to organize those abilities.
That's great. Mo, AI visionary, founder and CEO of Into Power, creator of the Hasan Method. Thank you for joining us on the Particle Accelerator Podcast.
You're welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.